She slapped the badge on the desk like it was garbage. "Take your badge and go." 4 words. That's all it took for Claire Whitmore, the most powerful CE in tech, to destroy a man she never bothered to understand. Nathan Brooks picked up that badge without a single word. No argument, no defense, just silence. And in that silence, the biggest mistake of her career was already in motion. Because the man she just fired, he didn't just work for Apex Meridian. He built it. Drop a comment below. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Nathan Brooks had a system. Every morning he woke at 5:14 a.m. not because an alarm told him to, because his daughter, Lily, would start stirring around 5:30, and he liked having those 16 minutes to himself. 16 minutes to stand in the kitchen, drink his coffee black, and listen to the house breathe. It was an old house, a 2-bedroom rental on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, where the pipes groaned in winter and the back porch screen door never quite latched all the way. But it was their house, his and Lily's. And in the quiet of those 16 minutes, Nathan would look at the small purple backpack hanging by the front door, the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, the single sneaker that somehow always ended up in the middle of the hallway, and he would feel something close to peace. He didn't ask for much anymore. That was the truth of Nathan Brooks at 39 years old. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't ask for credit. He didn't ask for anything beyond a steady paycheck, a healthy daughter, and the freedom to live a life that no one was paying much attention to. Some men shrink from obscurity. Nathan had chosen it. He dressed the same way, every day: dark slacks, a plain gray or navy collared shirt, the kind of shoes you buy in a 3-pack because they're comfortable and replaceable. His employee badge at Apex Meridian Corporation listed his title as Operations and Systems Technician. Not a director, not a manager, not even a team lead, just a technician. The man you called when a server room was running 3 degrees too hot. The man you called when a network relay was throwing error codes at 2 in the morning. The man who showed up, fixed the problem, and left without asking for a thank you. His colleagues didn't dislike him. They just didn't see him. Which, for Nathan, was exactly the point. He packed Lily's lunch at 5:47 every morning. Turkey sandwich on wheat, cut diagonal. She was 8 years old and deeply committed to the diagonal cut. Apple slices in a separate bag so they wouldn't make the sandwich soggy. A juice box. One small note tucked under the apple slices. Never anything elaborate. Sometimes just a drawing of a stick figure with a big smile. Sometimes a single sentence. "You are braver than you think." Sometimes just, "I love you, bug." He dropped her at school by 7:15 and was at his desk inside Apex Meridian's downtown Columbus Tower by 7:45. On most days, he was invisible. On this particular Tuesday in November, everything changed. He felt it before he understood it. There was something different in the building. That morning, a current running through the air, the way you can sometimes feel a storm coming before the clouds have gathered. People were talking in lower voices. Eyes were moving toward screens and then quickly away. The kind of controlled tension that offices develop when something has gone wrong but no one has been officially told yet. Nathan noticed it the way he noticed everything, quietly, carefully, without giving any outward sign that he noticed at all. He settled at his workstation on the 3rd floor and began his morning diagnostic review. System logs, network traffic patterns, security flagging reports. The routine work that most people at Apex Meridian wouldn't have been able to interpret even if they'd tried. Nathan ran through it the way a musician runs through scales fluently, automatically, his eyes catching anomalies before his conscious mind had even named what it was looking for. And that morning, something caught his eye, a data transfer log from the previous evening. 11:47 p.m. A packet of encrypted files had been accessed and moved from the executive documentation server, the secure tier that housed contract proposals, regulatory filings, and acquisition strategy documents. Files that were not supposed to leave the internal system without a multi-step authorization chain. The transfer had been logged under one user account. His. Nathan stared at the log for a long moment. He had not been in the building at 11:47 p.m. the previous evening. He had been home. He had made Lily a grilled cheese sandwich for dinner, helped her with a worksheet about state capitals, watched half an episode of some nature documentary about penguins before she fell asleep on the couch, and carried her to bed. He had not touched a Apex Meridian system after 4:30 p.m. Someone had used his credentials. Someone had known exactly how to use them in a way that looked legitimate. His hands were completely still as he sat there. His breathing didn't change. The expression on his face didn't shift not so much as a flicker. But behind that stillness, Nathan's mind was already moving at a speed that would have been unrecognizable to anyone who saw only the quiet technician in the plain gray shirt. He already knew, on some instinctive level, that this was not an accident. He already knew this was not a glitch. Someone had planned this. The question was, what was he going to do about it? He tried the right way first. He always tried the right way first. That was another one of Nathan's systems. Before you take extraordinary action, exhaust the ordinary options. It had served him well for years. He documented what he'd found. Precise, methodical, thorough. He formatted it the way he used to format security incident reports. Back when people paid attention to those reports, time-stamped, cross-referenced, with the anomalies highlighted and the recommend investigation steps clearly outlined. Then he sent it through the internal reporting channel to the IT security team and flagged it as high priority. That was at 8:22 a.m. By 10:15, the report had been marked reviewed by someone in the system. But Nathan had access to the admin layer of that reporting tool, access that technically wasn't documented anywhere in his current job description. Access that had simply never been revoked from a previous era, and he could see that reviewed meant it had been opened, glanced at for approximately 40 seconds, and filed away without any action. He sent a follow-up at 10:30 directly to the security team lead, Marcus Webb, a man Nathan had helped train 3 years ago on the internal audit protocol that Marcus probably thought he'd developed himself. Marcus responded at 11:05, "Thanks for flagging. We'll look into it." By noon, nothing had been looked into. Nathan ate lunch at his desk. A container of leftover pasta from Sunday. Lily's idea of helping, she'd stirred the sauce herself, very seriously, and only knocked over one thing. He ate it cold. He was watching the network traffic logs, refresh in the background of his screen, tracking something that was becoming clearer with every passing hour, building in the shape of a very bad picture. At 1:17 p.m., he tried one more ordinary option. He went upstairs. Not to Claire Whitmore's floor, not yet, not directly. He went to the internal compliance office on the 7th floor, a small department that most Apex Meridian employees didn't even know existed, and asked to file a formal data integrity concern report. The compliance officer, a young woman named Priya, who looked like she was fresh out of her master's program and still slightly surprised to find herself in an actual office building, looked at Nathan across the desk with an expression that fell somewhere between polite and puzzled. "You're sorry. You're from operations and systems?" "That's correct. And you're reporting a potential data breach?" "A potential unauthorized transfer of executive-tier documentation." "Yes." Priya blinked. "Have you reported this through the IT security channel?" "I have. Twice. And what was the response?" "They said they'd look into it." "Okay, so Priya seemed to be working through some internal flowchart. If IT security is already handling it, they're not handling it." Nathan kept his voice completely level. "They acknowledge the report. That's not the same thing." "Right, but..." Priya glanced at something on her screen. "Mr. Brooks, is it? The compliance reporting protocol for security concerns routes back through IT security first before." "I understand the protocol," Nathan said. "I helped write it." That landed strangely. Priya paused. "I'm sorry?" Nathan almost said more. He was right on the edge of it, right on the edge of explaining, of pulling back the curtain just enough to make her understand why this mattered, why the routing protocol she was citing as a barrier was actually part of the problem. But he looked at Priya's face and saw the bureaucratic architecture around her, the flowcharts, the escalation chains, the institutional inertia, and he understood that pushing harder in this office today, through this particular channel, was not going to get the job done. "Thank you for your time," he said instead, and he went back downstairs. He was still sitting at his desk at 3:45 p., running a parallel analysis on his own quietly, without touching anything he wasn't authorized to touch, using only what was visible to him through his legitimate access when his phone rang. Internal line, extension from the executive floor. Mr. Brooks, a voice he didn't recognize, assistant or coordinator, from the clipped professional tone. "Ms. Whitmore would like to see you in her office at 4 o'clock. A beat of silence. 4 o'clock, Nathan said. Yes. Please come to the executive reception on the 14th floor. He had never been to the 14th floor. In 3 years of working at Apex Meridian, Nathan Brooks had never had a reason to go above the 10th floor, where the more senior operations staff occasionally had meetings. The 14th floor was where the executive suite lived. Claire Whitmore's territory. He saved his work. He straightened his collar habit, not vanity. He picked up a small notebook he carried everywhere, the kind with a simple black cover, and tucked it in his breast pocket. And he went upstairs. The executive floor felt like a different building. Everything was quieter, more deliberate. The carpet was thicker, the lighting warmer, the furniture chosen to project permanence and authority rather than merely utility. The receptionist at the desk near the elevator looked at Nathan's badge, then at Nathan, with an expression that was professionally neutral but contained in the slight flicker of her gaze, the full assessment of his plain clothes and his floor of origin. "Brooks? Yes. She'll see you now." He walked through the glass-walled corridor, toward Claire Whitmore's office, and through the glass, he could see her before she saw him standing at the far side of a large, clean desk, looking out the window at the Columbus skyline with her arms crossed and her posture carrying the particular tension of someone who has already made a decision and is simply waiting for the paperwork. She turned when he entered. Nathan had seen Claire Whitmore from a distance company-wide meetings, the occasional pass in a lobby. She was striking, not in the way that announced itself, but in the way that quality always does, in the details. The precise cut of her dark jacket, the absolute stillness of her expression. She was 36 years old and ran one of the most technically sophisticated corporations in the country, and every line of her carried the weight of someone who had fought for every inch of where she stood. She looked at him and saw a technician in a gray shirt. He looked at her and saw someone who was about to make a terrible mistake. "Mr. Brooks," she said. Not warmly, not unkindly, just precisely the way you say something when you want it to be perfectly clear that this is a professional interaction and nothing more. "Whitmore." He sat. She didn't. She stayed standing, which was a tactic, keep the position of authority clear, and Nathan noted it the way he noted all tactics, without resentment, just awareness. "I'm going to be direct with you," she said. "We have a situation. And your name is part of that situation." "I know," Nathan said. That surprised her. Just slightly the smallest shift in her expression, a fraction of a second where the composure was recalibrated. "You know? I reported it this morning," Nathan said. "Through IT security, and through the compliance office. I found the anomaly in the transfer log at approximately 8:15 and filed the report by 8:22. Claire was quiet for a moment. "What you found in the log," she said carefully, "was evidence that your credentials were used to access and transfer restricted executive documents." "Evidence that my credentials were used," Nathan said. "Yes, not evidence that I used them. The distinction matters to you." "It should matter to you too," Nathan said. "Because if someone inside this company is sophisticated enough to spoof a credentialed access event at that tier of the system, You have a significantly larger problem than a mid-level employee going through executive files. Claire studied him for a moment. "Walk me through what you think happened," she said. Not dismissively, with the careful attention of someone who is evaluating information even as they've already made a judgment. Nathan walked her through it, methodically, clearly. The timestamp, the transfer volume, the file directory that was accessed, the fact that the access pattern didn't match his typical system behavior in 3 specific ways that he laid out, point by point. He didn't use jargon. He didn't try to overwhelm her with technical detail. He spoke the way he used to speak in briefings, simply, precisely, making sure the logic was visible in the structure of the explanation. When he finished, Claire was quiet again, and then she opened the desk drawer and placed something on the glass surface between them. "His badge, Mr. Brooks," she said. "I've reviewed the security team's analysis. The log shows your credentials. The access window corresponds to a gap in our monitoring coverage." And she paused. "You had documented access to the executive documentation server through a legacy administrative override that should have been decommissioned." Nathan looked at the badge on the desk. "That access wasn't unauthorized," he said. "It was never revoked. There's a difference. The optics of that difference," Claire said, "are not something this company can afford right now." "I reported this breach," Nathan said. His voice was still steady, still quiet, "this morning, before anyone came to talk to me. That's not the behavior of someone trying to hide something. It could be the behavior of someone trying to get ahead of an investigation." The room was very quiet. Nathan looked at her. She looked at him. And in that moment, in that gap between them, across a glass desk in a room that smelled of expensive restraint, something happened that was almost invisible. Nathan saw it clearly. She had already decided. It wasn't malice. That was the thing that would stay with him, later, when he had the distance to think about it. It wasn't cruelty. Claire Whitmore was not a cruel person. She was a precise person, an efficient person, a person who moved through the world with the conviction that clarity required brevity, and that decisions made with hesitation were often decisions made worse. She had looked at the available information and reached a logical conclusion based on what was visible to her. And what was visible to her was a technician with access he shouldn't have had, whose credentials appeared in a log that corresponded to a theft who was now sitting in her office with a perfectly calm face, telling her a story she couldn't verify. She hadn't looked beneath the surface. She hadn't questioned whether there was a surface to look beneath. That was her mistake. She didn't know she was making it. Claire Whitmore slid his badge across the glass desk. "We're going to need to let you go," she said. "Pending investigation. We're suspending your access and terminating your employment. The company will cooperate with any inquiry you believe is relevant. HR will reach you with the formal documentation." Nathan didn't move for a moment. The badge sat between them. He thought about his morning diagnostic. He thought about the parallel analysis he'd been building all day, the pattern that had been crystallizing with every hour. The shape of something he hadn't fully named yet, but could feel in his bones the way you feel a structural crook falls. He thought about Lily, about the purple backpack by the front door, about the crayon drawings on the refrigerator, about the morning he had carried her to bed after she fell asleep watching penguins on television, and the way she had murmured something half asleep, just his name. Just Dad, the way children call out in dreams when they need to know you're still there. He picked up the badge. He could say it, right now. He could tell her. Not everything, not all of it, not the full history that would have taken hours to properly explain, but enough. Enough to make her pause. Enough to make her ask a different question. Enough to change the shape of this moment. He looked at Claire Whitmore, and he thought about what it would cost him. Not this job, he'd walked away from bigger things than this job. But the exposure, the attention that would come back. The questions that would follow. The world he had left behind. The world that knew his real name and his real work. Pressing back into the life he had carefully built around the things that actually mattered to him. He thought about Lily. And he made his choice. He stood up. "Thank you for your time, Miss Whitmore," he said. And he walked out of the room. He was at the elevator when he heard her voice behind him, not calling him back. She wasn't someone who called people back, once she'd made a decision, but saying something quietly to the assistant who had materialized near the office door. He didn't catch the words. He didn't need to. The elevator doors opened. He stepped in. And as the doors closed, Nathan Brooks looked down at the badge in his hand, the small laminated rectangle with his name and his title and his photo from 3 years ago, when he'd still had the slightly lean look of someone who hadn't quite adjusted to a life that moved slowly. Operations and systems technician. He turned the badge over once in his fingers. Then he put it in his pocket. Downstairs, he retrieved the personal items from his desk quickly and without ceremony. A phone charger, the small black notebook, a photograph of Lily that he kept tucked at the side of his monitor, not displayed prominently, but there, always within his field of vision. A coffee mug. She had decorated herself with stickers. Marcus Webb from IT Security passed by and did a small double-take. "Brooks, what's going on?" "Letting go," Nathan said simply. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the box in Nathan's hands. "Man, I didn't know it was going to go that far. I thought they were just going to." "It's all right, Marcus." "It's not, Marcus." Nathan looked at him steadily. "Take care of yourself, and check the system logs from the last 48 hours. All of them, the full stack, not just the flagged events." Marcus stared at him. "What am I looking for?" "You'll know it when you see it," Nathan said. "If you look." He picked up his box and walked toward the lobby. At the front desk, the security guard, a heavyset man named Gerald, who Nathan had worked alongside at enough late nights to have a comfortable, wordless understanding, stood up slightly when he saw the box. "Mr. Brooks?" "Gerald." Nathan set his badge on the security desk. "The official procedure: check out your credentials. Confirm termination of access." "Good working with you." Gerald looked uncomfortable. "They're really doing this? I heard something was going on, but I didn't think." He lowered his voice. "This doesn't seem right. A lot of things in life don't seem right at first," Nathan said. Gerald processed the badge with the reluctant efficiency of someone who doesn't agree with what he's been assigned. "You going to be okay?" Nathan thought of Lily. "Yes," he said. "I'm going to be just fine." He turned toward the lobby doors. He was 10 feet from those doors, 10 feet from stepping out into the November cold with his box and his coffee mug and his daughter's photograph when he heard it. The sound of tires. Not one car, multiple. The particular low-frequency sound of vehicles arriving with purpose. Nathan stopped. He turned slowly and looked through the tall glass lobby windows. A black SUV had pulled to the curb directly in front of the main entrance. Then another one, sliding in behind it. Then a third. Nathan stood very still. One by one, like a deliberate statement, 4 more black SUVs pulled into position along the front of the Apex Meridian Tower, flanking the entrance in a formation that made every person in the lobby turn and stare without quite understanding why, only understanding, on some animal level, that something important was happening, that this was not routine, that the shape of this day had just changed completely. 7 vehicles, dark windows, government plates on 2 of them, corporate council plates on 3 more, 2 with no markings at all. The lobby went completely silent. Behind Nathan, he heard the quiet sound of someone drawing in a sharp breath. Then another. The ripple of awareness moving through the space like something dropped in still water. He didn't turn around. He stood there with his box, looking at those 7 black SUVs, and for the first time since Claire Whitmore had slid his badge across that glass desk, something happened to the expression on Nathan Brooks' face. Not quite a smile, more like the recognition of something inevitable. There it is, he thought. There it is. The lobby doors opened, and Nathan set his box down on the nearest surface, because somehow he already had known, on some level, since the moment he picked up his badge from that glass desk, that he was not, in fact, going anywhere. Not today. Upstairs, in the glass-walled office on the 14th floor, Claire Whitmore was looking at her phone when her assistant knocked. "Ms. Whitmore? I'm in the middle of something. I understand. But there are several vehicles out front, and the lobby security is reporting." "What kind of vehicles?" A pause. "Black SUVs. 7 of them. And there are people, lawyers and investigators. It looks like. And someone from the board, Ms. Whitmore. Mr. Hale is." Claire was already moving. She was already halfway to the door. And something she had not felt in a very long time, something she had trained herself, carefully and deliberately, not to feel in professional contexts, was moving through her chest like cold water. For the first time in years, Claire Whitmore was not certain. And below her, in the lobby of the company she ran, the man she had just fired was standing calmly with a box of his belongings, watching 7 black SUVs disgorge a procession of people who had driven here for him, and looking, for all the world, like a man who had been waiting quietly for the rest of the world to catch up. He never raised his voice. He never made a threat. He never told her who he was. He simply picked up the badge. And waited. Because Nathan Brooks had learned something that Claire Whitmore, for all her brilliance, had not yet understood. The truth doesn't need your help to arrive. It just needs time. The doors opened at 4:47 p.m. Not with a bang, not with shouting. That was the thing. Nobody in that lobby would forget afterward how quiet it was. How the men and women who stepped out of those 7 black SUVs moved with the deliberate, unhurried of people who already knew exactly how this was going to end and had no need to perform urgency for anyone watching. The first one through the door was a woman in a dark coat carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind her came 2 men in suits, not the flashy kind, not the kind that announced themselves, but the kind of suits that said, "We have been in very serious rooms for a very long time, and we are comfortable there." Then came 3 more. Then 2 others flanking someone Nathan hadn't expected to see move that fast. Victor Hale, 68 years old, chairman of the Apex Meridian Board. A man Nathan had last spoken to 3 years ago in a context that neither of them had ever discussed with anyone else. Victor Hale, who walked with a cane on most days, was not using his cane today. He was moving through that lobby like a man 30 years younger, and his eyes went directly to Nathan before he had fully cleared the door. Nathan hadn't moved from where he stood. He'd set his box down on a nearby surface, a low table near the lobby seating area, and stood with his hands at his sides, watching the procession come through. And when Victor's eyes found him, something passed between the 2 of them that had no name and required no words. An acknowledgement. A reckoning. The particular look of 2 people who have known each other's weight for a long time, finally arriving at the same room at the same time. Gerald, the security guard, had backed away from the front desk approximately 6 feet, which was probably the most dramatic physical response that Gerald had ever allowed himself in a professional context. The lobby had maybe 30 people in it, people who'd been coming and going, staff heading home for the day, a courier waiting for a signature, a few visitors in the seating area near the windows. Every single one of them had stopped completely. Nobody was looking at their phone. Nobody was heading for the elevator. They were all doing the same thing, holding perfectly still and watching. The woman with the briefcase spoke first. Her name was Catherine Voss, and Nathan recognized her not from Apex Meridian, from a previous life, from a world he'd walked away from as one of the 3 best corporate litigation attorneys in the state of Ohio. She represented people and institutions when the stakes were high enough that reputation alone wasn't sufficient armor. "We're looking for a Nathan Brooks," she said, to no one in particular and to everyone in general. From his spot 10 feet from the exit, Nathan said, "That's me." Catherine Voss turned and looked at him, looked at the box on the table, looked at his badge, or rather, at the absence of it, since he'd already surrendered it to Gerald. Then she looked at him again with an expression that contained, very briefly, something that might have been respect. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "you're not going anywhere." "I was beginning to think that myself," Nathan said. She actually smiled at that. Just slightly, just enough. Victor Hale had reached him by then, and without ceremony or preamble, the 68-year-old chairman of the board extended his hand. Nathan shook it. "You should have called me," Victor said. "I tried the right way first," Nathan said. Victor looked at him for a long moment. "How far did that get you?" Nathan glanced at the box on the table. "About 10 feet from the front door." Victor made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was in the same neighborhood. Then he turned to look upward, toward the upper floors, toward wherever in the building Claire Whitmore currently was, and his expression shifted into something considerably more serious. "We have a lot to untangle," he said. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "We do." It was at that moment that Claire Whitmore stepped out of the elevator. She had moved fast. Nathan had given her credit for that. Whatever her assistant had told her, she had processed it quickly enough to get downstairs inside of 4 minutes, which meant she hadn't stood there frozen or tried to manage it from above. She had come down. Whatever else she was someone who walked toward problems rather than away from them. But she had not been prepared for the scale of what was waiting for her. She stepped out of the elevator, and her eyes swept the lobby, and something happened to her face that Nathan had not expected to see. Not panic, not anger, something rawer than either of those things. Something that looked, for just a fraction of a second, like genuine bewilderment, the expressions of someone whose map of the situation has just proven completely wrong, and who hasn't yet had time to build a new one. She saw the lawyers, she saw the investigators. She saw the people she recognized from the board and the people she didn't recognize, but whose bearing told her they were not people who showed up, unless something very significant was happening. She saw Victor Hale standing next to Nathan Brooks. And she saw Nathan Brooks standing there not in handcuffs, not being escorted, not being questioned. Standing there like he belonged, like he had always belonged. Claire walked forward. Her posture was perfect. Her expression was being held carefully in place. "Victor," she addressed the chairman directly, "the way you address the most important person in a room when everything else in the room is confusing you. What is this?" "This," Victor said, "is a cleanup operation." "And a correction." "A correction." Her voice was measured. "Would you like to explain your CFO, Ethan Caldwell, has been running a financial diversion scheme by this company for approximately 18 months, Victor said. Not loudly, quietly. In fact, the way you say something when you want every word to land with its full weight rather than be diluted by volume. He has moved approximately $14 million through 17 subsidiary accounts, using a layering structure sophisticated enough that it passed 4 separate internal audits without triggering review. Claire stared at him. 14 million, she said. 14.3, one of the investigators said from behind Catherine Voss. We'll have the final figure within 72 hours. The lobby was so quiet that Nathan could hear faintly the sound of traffic outside. Ethan, Claire said. Just the name, like she was testing the weight of it. The transfer you attributed to Mr. Brooks last night, Victor continued, was staged. Caldwell used Brooks' legacy administrative credentials, which Brooks had repeatedly flagged for proper decommissioning, and which were never properly decommissioned to move a set of documents that implicated his own operation. The intent was to create a credentialed trail pointing to Brooks, trigger an immediate investigation, and use the confusion to complete the final phase of his diversion before anyone looked in the right direction. Claire was very still. He used, she said slowly, Nathan's access. Nathan discovered the anomaly this morning at approximately 8:15 a.m., Victor said. He reported it through 3 separate channels before noon. Every report was routed into review queues that Caldwell had influence over. Every report was neutralized. Victor paused. And then, this afternoon, instead of the company investigating the breach, the company fired the man who reported it. The silence that followed that sentence had a particular quality to it. The kind of silence that isn't absence of sound so much as it is presence of weight. Claire Whitmore turned and looked at Nathan Brooks. Really looked at him. For the first time, and Nathan could see this thing hang in real time, could see the previous framing dissolving and something new struggling to take its place. She was looking at him, without the filter of what she had assumed he was. She was looking at a man she did not know. "Who are you?" she said. It wasn't rhetorical. She genuinely wanted to know. Nathan looked at her and said nothing for a moment. "Then right now, the man you fired this afternoon." Victor made a small sound. "Catherine, would you?" Catherine Voss opened her briefcase and produced a tablet, which she turned toward Claire with the document. On the screen, a page from what appeared to be an older corporate filing, the kind that predated Claire's tenure at Apex Meridian by several years. Claire looked at the screen. Her eyes moved across it. And Nathan watched her face as she read, as she found the name, in whatever context it appeared, and began understanding what it meant. "You developed the core shield architecture," she said. It wasn't a question. "The security infrastructure this company runs on," Nathan said, "is built on a framework I designed in 2014. Before Apex Meridian was Apex Meridian, when it was still a mid-sized data services company that had just had its breach in 2 years and was about 3 bad quarters away from not existing." Claire's expression was very still, very careful, like someone trying to handle something fragile. "That architecture is the reason we've been breach-proof for 9 years," Nathan said. "Yes. Why are you?" She stopped. Started again. "Why were you working as a systems technician?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Because my daughter needed a father more than the industry needed another name," he said. "Because after my wife died, I made a choice about what kind of life I wanted to build." And because he paused, and there was something in his voice then that was not bitterness but was its near neighbor, "I found that people were willing to let me live that quiet life as long as I stayed invisible. Nobody bothered asking what was underneath the badge." Claire Whitmore looked at him for a long moment, and then, for the first time in that entire encounter, her posture changed. Just slightly. The perfect professional architecture of it softened, almost imperceptibly, at the shoulders. She looked like someone who had just realized they had walked into a room through the wrong door and was now seeing the whole layout differently. "Mr. Brooks," she started. "We'll have time for that conversation," Victor said, not unkindly. "Right now, we need to move. Catherine's team needs access to the CFO's office and his personal server partition. And we need to locate Ethan Caldwell. He left the building at 4:15, Nathan said. Everyone looked at him. "I saw him go," Nathan said simply. "On the third-floor lobby feed. I still had monitoring access at that point." Catherine Voss was already on her phone. Victor looked at Nathan with an expression that was impossible to fully read, something between admiration and something closer to grief. The look of a man who understood what it cost to stay invisible for as long as Nathan had stayed invisible and felt the weight of it personally. "Come upstairs," Victor said. "We're going to need you." Nathan looked at the box on the table, the coffee mug with the stickers. Lily's photograph. "I need to make one call first," he said. "Of course." He stepped away from the group and called the neighbor who picked Lily up from school on the days he ran late, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Okafor, who lived 2 houses down and who had become, over the past 3 years, one of the most important people in Nathan and Lily's lives without ever making a production of it. "Mrs. Okafor, it's Nathan. I'm going to be late tonight. Maybe very late. Is everything all right, dear?" He looked across the lobby at the 7 lawyers and investigators and board members and the woman who had fired him 3 hours ago, now standing in a loose cluster being directed by Victor Hale like a general reorganizing his command. "It's getting there," Nathan said. He heard Lily's voice in the background, a high, enthusiastic voice, narrating something to Mrs. Okafor's cat with great seriousness, and he felt something settle in his chest. Something that had been braced and tight all day, since 8:15 this morning, releasing a fraction. "I'll make sure she has dinner," Mrs. Okafor said. "Already moving, already handling it." "You do what you need to do." "Thank you," Nathan said. "I'll explain everything later." He hung up and turned back to the room. Victor was waiting. Catherine was waiting. The whole assembled force of what had arrived in those 7 black vehicles was waiting, not impatiently, but with the readiness of something that had been set in motion and would not stop until it ran its full course. And Claire Whitmore was standing slightly apart from the group, near the lobby windows, looking out at the street with an expression that Nathan couldn't fully read from where he stood, but that contained, in its set and in its stillness, the quality of someone doing very serious arithmetic in their head. He walked back to the group. "Ready," he said to Victor. And they went upstairs. The next 4 hours were, in the later recollection of everyone who was present for them, something like watching a demolition from inside the building. Systematic, methodical, almost quiet in its thoroughness. Catherine's team moved through Ethan Caldwell's office with the focused energy of people who had done this before, and who understood that the most important evidence is usually not the thing that announces itself, but the thing that is adjacent to the thing being hidden. They pulled hard drives. They pulled physical files. They pulled a secondary phone that had been taped to the underside of Caldwell's desk drawer in a way that suggested it had been placed there by someone who expected to need to deny its existence. The financial investigators worked in the company's server room, the same server room where Nathan had spent hundreds of hours over the past 3 years, where he knew every cabinet and every cable run and every quirk of the environmental controls, and they moved through it with the confident ease of people who had been given a map by someone who knew the territory extremely well. That someone had been Nathan. 2 days ago, before any of this became public, Nathan had sent a secure, encrypted file to an address that only a handful of people in the world knew to check. He had sent it to Victor Hale's private contact channel, a channel that Nathan himself had helped design years ago, when Victor had come to him asking for help building a communication structure that he could trust absolutely. The file had contained Nathan's analysis, everything he'd assembled, the access logs, the pattern analysis, the financial signal he'd picked up in a routine systems check 3 weeks earlier that had started this whole thread, unraveling a small irregularity in how data packets were being routed through a subsidiary node that made no operational sense. Unless someone was using that node for something the node wasn't supposed to be used for. He had sent the file, and then he had waited, because Victor had asked him to wait, had told him he needed time to assemble the right team and the right legal framework before they moved. That if they moved too early, Caldwell would have time to cover his tracks and the whole thing would collapse. So Nathan had waited, and while he waited, Caldwell had moved. And while Caldwell moved, the staged credential event happened. And while the staged credential event was happening, Claire Whitmore had been handed a piece of evidence that fit the narrative Caldwell had constructed, and she had acted on it the way any competent executive would act when presented with evidence of a breach, quickly and decisively, before the problem could spread. She had not known she was closing the trap. That was the thing Nathan kept coming back to, in the quiet moments between tasks, during those 4 hours, the moments when he was being asked to walk someone through a piece of system architecture, or to confirm an element of the access log analysis, or to explain the technical structure of the credential spoofing in terms that non-technical attorneys could understand and use in a legal proceeding. Claire Whitmore had not known. She had not known she was being used. She had not known that the man she fired was the man who had built the walls she was standing inside. She had not known because no one had told her, and no one had told her because Nathan had spent 3 years being invisible, and he had done that job so thoroughly that when it mattered most, the invisibility had worked against him. He didn't blame her. He was honest enough with himself to understand that the anger he'd felt, the quiet, controlled anger he'd carried in his chest from the 14th floor down to the lobby that afternoon, was real. It was legitimate. She had dismissed him without due process. She had made a judgment about his character based on the access log and the legacy credentials, and the fact that he was a systems technician in a gray shirt, and she had not considered that the story might be more complicated than the evidence suggested. But anger and blame were 2 different things, and Nathan was old enough. and had been through enough to understand the difference. Somewhere around 7:30 p. During a brief break, while Catherine conferred with her co-counsel, Nathan found himself standing near a window on the 14th floor, not in Claire's office, but in the adjacent conference room that had been commandeered as a workings space, with a cup of coffee that someone had produced from somewhere. And for a few minutes, he was just a tired man drinking coffee and looking at the Columbus skyline going dark outside. He heard her before he saw her. Footsteps that had a different quality from the brisk, purposeful movement that had characterized everyone else in the building over the past few hours. Slower, more considered, Claire Whitmore walked into the conference room. She was still immaculate, the jacket still precise, the posture still upright, but there was something different about her now. The quality of command that she wore like a second skin had thinned, just slightly. She looked like some carrying something heavy. She looked, Nathan thought, like a person. "You could have told me," she said. She wasn't accusatory. It wasn't an argument. It was just a statement, laid out there between them, waiting to see what he'd do with it. "I tried," Nathan said. 3 different ways. You know what I mean." Nathan looked at his coffee. "Who I am? Yes. What would that have looked like?" he said. A systems technician walks into a CEO's office and says, "By the way, before you fire me, I should tell you I designed the security architecture this company runs on." He paused. "You had already made your decision. I could see it in the way you placed the badge on the desk." The conversation was a formality. Claire was quiet. "You weren't wrong," she said finally, "about the decision being made." "I know. I was wrong about the decision itself." Nathan looked at her. "I know that too," he said. She was quiet again for a moment. "Then how long have you known it was Caldwell?" 3 weeks, Nathan said. Give or take. The initial signal was subtle, a data routing irregularity that most people wouldn't have flagged. But once I started pulling on that thread, it moved fast. "And you sent it to Victor." "Victor and I have known each other for a long time," Nathan said. "He's one of the few people who knew I was here, who knew why I was here. He never told me. He respected my decision to be left alone." Claire absorbed that. "And when the stage credential event happened, when Caldwell moved the files under your access." "I knew immediately what it was," Nathan said. "I reported it. I gave the company every legitimate opportunity to catch it through proper channels. And Caldwell had compromised those channels. Enough of them." "Yes." She let out a slow breath. It wasn't a sigh so much as the deliberate release of someone who has been holding something tight for hours and is beginning to let it go. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not asking for absolution. What I did today was wrong. Not because of who you are, not because of CoreShield or your history with this company. It was wrong because I looked at a man who had done everything right and treated him like he had done everything wrong. And I did it fast, and I did it without enough questions." Nathan looked at her. "That's accurate," he said. "I know." She met his eyes. "I'm telling you because I think you deserve to hear me say it without caveats. Not I'm sorry, but here's the context. Just, I made a serious mistake, and it was mine." The conference room was quiet, except for the muffled sounds of the investigation still running in other rooms. Nathan set his coffee cup down. "The people who are hardest to see," he said slowly, "aren't because they're hiding. Most of them aren't hiding at all. They're just not looked at. There's a difference." He paused. "I spent 3 years in this building. I know every system in it, every vulnerability, every anomaly. I showed up when things broke. I fixed things before they broke, so most of the time no one knew there'd been a problem at all. And not once in 3 years did anyone in a position of authority in this company ask me a single meaningful question about what I actually knew." Claire Whitmore didn't look away from him. "That's the part," she said quietly, "that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time." "I know," Nathan said. There was a knock at the conference room door. One of Catherine's associates leaned in. "Mr. Brooks, we need your sign-off on the technical characterization in Section 4. There's a disagreement about how to describe the credential spoofing mechanism in terms a federal judge can follow. I'll be right there, Nathan said. He picked up his coffee and turned toward the door. Then stopped, turned back. Ms. Whitmore, he said. She looked at him. The systems that protect this company, the architecture, the protocols, everything built on top of CoreShield over the past 9 years, they're good. They're solid, but they haven't been updated for the current threat environment. Caldwell found a gap, and he was patient enough to use it. Nathan paused. Someone who knows that architecture needs to be in a position where they can address that. Not from the 3rd floor. He let that sit for a moment. Then he walked through the door. Behind him, in the conference room, Claire Whitmore stood alone for a moment with the Columbus skyline going fully dark outside. And with the sounds of an investigation dismantling everything she had believed about her own company running through the walls around her. Ethan Caldwell was apprehended at 9:23 p.m. that evening. He was at Port Columbus International Airport, which told you something about how certain he had been that the credential event would buy him enough time. He had been so sure of his staging, so confident in the construction of his false trail, that he had not allowed for the possibility that Nathan Brooks would already have sent his analysis to Victor Hale 2 days earlier. He had not allowed for the possibility that the invisible man in the gray shirt had been quietly, methodically, ahead of him the entire time. Nathan heard about the apprehension from Catherine Voss at 9:31. He was in the server room by then, working with 2 of the financial investigators to trace the complete path of the diverted funds through the subsidiary account structure, not because it was his job, technically, but because he was the only person in the building who could map the system architecture quickly enough to make the financial trace move at the speed the investigators needed it to move. Got him, Catherine said from the doorway. Nathan looked up. Airport, she said. I know, Nathan said. He likes windows. Always has an exit close. Catherine tilted her head slightly at that. Filed it away. We're going to need you available for the next several weeks. Depositions, technical review, possibly testimony. I understand. The board will be in contact about your formal role going forward. Victor was very clear that there are no limitations on what that conversation can include. Nathan didn't respond to that directly. He turned back to the trace he was running, fingers moving across the keyboard with a fluency that had nothing to do with a systems technician's job description. Catherine watched him for a moment. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. 3 years in this building. Knowing what you know. Knowing what you built. Watching other people get credit for the systems you designed. She paused. Didn't that cost you something? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Every morning, he said, I make my daughter's lunch. Turkey on wheat, diagonal cut. Apple slices in a separate bag. He paused. That doesn't cost me anything. That's what I chose. Another pause. The rest of it he looked up briefly. The rest of it I made peace with a long time ago. Catherine nodded slowly. Your daughter's lucky, she said. I'm the lucky one, Nathan said. He went back to the trace. Outside the city had gone fully dark, and the 7 black SUVs sat empty along the curb where they had parked 4.5 hours earlier. Their job done, their message delivered, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, absolute certainty of a truth that had been waiting patiently for exactly the right moment to arrive. He didn't get home until 11:43 that night. Mrs. Okafor had left the porch light on. That small thing, that single bulb burning yellow in the November dark, hit Nathan somewhere deep in the chest when he pulled up to the curb. The kind of hit you don't see coming because you've been running so hard all day that you forgot. You were also carrying something fragile. He sat in the car for a moment, with the engine off and the cold pressing against the windows, and just breathed. Inside, Lily was asleep on the couch, under a blanket that Mrs. Okafor had folded around her with the particular thoroughness of a woman who had spent 30 years making sure children were warm. Her hair was slightly tangled. One sock was half off. She was holding, loosely in one hand, a small stuffed rabbit named Captain that had been through the washing machine so many times it had lost most of its original color, and now existed in a state of cheerful, fated determination. Nathan stood in the doorway and looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked her up, all 54 pounds of her, boneless and heavy, the way sleeping children always are, and carried her to bed. She stirred once, the way she always did, just enough to murmur something. "Dad, right here, Bug." She was already back under. "You smell like the office." "Yeah," he said quietly. Long day. He tucked the blanket around her, set Captain carefully in the crook of her arm, stood in the dark of her room for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then he went to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and stared at the wall. He was not a man who processed things loudly. Never had been. The machinery of Nathan Brooks ran quiet and deep emotions that in another person might have produced shaking hands, or a raised voice, or a need to call someone. In Nathan produced something more like a very still very clear lake on a windless day. Everything was there. Everything was visible. He just had to wait for it to settle before he could see the bottom. Tonight, the bottom took a while. He thought about Claire Whitmore's face when she'd read the document Catherine Voss had shown her on the tablet. The way the knowledge had moved through her, not like a wave, crashing and dramatic, but like a slow, cold current, changing the temperature of everything it touched. He thought about the moment she'd said, plainly, and without caveat, that she'd made a serious mistake and it was hers. He thought about how hard that was. Actually, how genuinely hard that was for a person whose entire professional identity was built on being right, on being the one who walked into broken companies and fixed them, on never being the source of the problem. He respected her for it. He hadn't expected to, but he did. He thought about Ethan Caldwell at the airport. He'd never liked Caldwell, not in the way you actively dislike someone, not with heat, but with a quiet, watchful wariness that had been there from almost the first time he'd seen the man in the hallway 3 years ago. There was something in Caldwell that Nathan recognized from a long time back, from a world he'd left, the particular quality of a man who had learned to move through institutions by understanding what everyone around him wanted and giving them just enough of it. Caldwell was good at appearing, good at reflecting back what the room wanted to see. And for 18 months, apparently, he had also been very good at stealing. $14 million. Nathan almost shook his head. The audacity of it, the patience, the careful construction of a false trail that pointed at someone who had been invisible for so long that nobody would think to question the accusation. Caldwell had chosen Nathan not at random. Nathan understood that clearly now. Caldwell had chosen him because he knew somehow, at least partially, what Nathan had been. And he had known that a man like Nathan, a man who had chosen invisibility, who had chosen quiet, who had a daughter and a routine and everything to lose from exposure, was less likely to fight back than someone with nothing left to protect. He had miscalculated on the last part. Nathan stared at the wall. He thought about one more thing before he finally went to bed. He thought about what Catherine had asked him in the server room. "Didn't that cost you something?" 3 years in this building, invisible, watching other people build careers on top of a foundation you'd laid. He had answered honestly. He believed his answer. But the honest answer and the complete answer were not always the same thing. And in the privacy of his own kitchen at midnight, Nathan allowed himself to acknowledge what he usually didn't. Yes, there had been a cost. Not to his peace, not to his choices which he stood behind absolutely. But somewhere beneath the quiet, beneath the acceptance, there was a small hard thing that had lived in his chest for 3 years, the specific weight of being in a room full of people who would have treated you entirely differently if they'd known. The weight of watching someone dismiss you, talk over you, route your reports to dead-end queues, slide your badge across a desk, and knowing, without being able to say it, that the dismissal was the product of a story they'd told themselves about who you were based solely on what you were wearing. That weight was real. He wasn't angry about it anymore, exactly. But it was real, And pretending it wasn't real would be its own kind of dishonesty. He went to bed at 12:30. He set his alarm for 5:14. He closed his eyes. And he slept better than he had in 3 weeks. The next morning moved fast. By 7 a.m., Nathan had dropped Lily at school. She had accepted his explanation of Dad had a very complicated day at work yesterday, with the gracious equanimity of an 8-year-old who has learned that adult work complications are real but also fundamentally less interesting than the fact that her friend Zoe had brought a gecko to school in her pocket, and by 7:45, he was back at Apex Meridian. This time, nobody looked through him when he walked in. Gerald was at the front security desk, and when Nathan pushed through the lobby doors, Gerald stood, the full height of him, and said, "Morning, Mr. Brooks," in a tone that was entirely different from any tone he'd used in the previous 3 years. Nathan paused. "Gerald." "Just Nathan. Same as yesterday." Gerald looked at him. "Yesterday you were being let go. And today? Today the whole building is talking about you." Nathan set his jaw slightly. "How's that going?" "Depends who you ask," Gerald said. "The folks who've worked with you on the floor? They're not exactly surprised, but they're processing it. The executive floor people?" He made a small sound. "Some of them look like they've been told the foundation of the building is made of something they didn't know about." Which was, Nathan thought, a fairly accurate description. "Victor Hale is already upstairs," Gerald said. "He said to send you up when you came in." A pause. "Also, Ms. Whitmore is in, is she?" "Came in at 6:15, Gerald said. "Which in 3 years I've never seen." Nathan processed that. "All right," he said. "Thank you, Gerald." He took the elevator to the 14th floor. The executive suite had a different atmosphere this morning. Still polished, still deliberate in all its surfaces, but something had changed in the air, a place where something significant has recently happened, and the walls haven't absorbing it yet. People moved more carefully. Voices were quieter. The 2 assistants near the main corridor looked up when Nathan stepped off the elevator and exchanged a glance with each other that contained approximately 4 sentences worth of unspoken communication. Victor Hale was in the main conference room, on the phone, with the focused stillness of a man conducting 3 simultaneous negotiations. He saw Nathan, held up one finger a minute, and kept talking. Nathan went to the side table where someone had set up coffee and poured himself a cup and waited. Victor finished the call at 8:04. "Board meeting is moved up," he said, by way of greeting. "Day after tomorrow instead of next week. They want a full briefing on the Caldwell situation, the security breach, the legal exposure, and the remediation plan." He looked at Nathan steadily. "They're going to ask about you, I assumed. I want you in that room." Nathan was quiet for a moment. In what capacity? As the person who understood what was happening in this company, before anyone else did, Victor said. As the person who built the infrastructure that is currently the only reason we're not facing an additional set of catastrophic developments on top of everything else. He paused. And as the person I should have protected better. Nathan looked at him. "Victor, I knew you were here," Victor said. "I knew you were here, and I knew why, and I respected that. But I also knew you were working with access to systems that were never properly transitioned, and I knew there was a gap in the company's understanding of its own security architecture. And I let it sit because I didn't want to disturb what you'd built for yourself." He paused. "That was wrong. A man like Caldwell looks for exactly those kinds of gaps." I handed him one. The conference room was very quiet. "You didn't hand him anything," Nathan said.
"He took it."
"The distinction matters less than the result." "It matters considerably," Nathan said. "But I understand what you're saying." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not angry at you, Victor. You might reconsider that." "I never waste anger on things I chose," Nathan said. "I chose to be invisible. I chose not to update my documentation trail. I could have walked into Claire Whitmore's office 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago and had a 5-minute conversation that would have changed everything. I didn't. That was my choice. He set down his coffee cup. I'm not a victim of what happened yesterday. I'm a person who watched a situation develop and made certain decisions about how to respond. Some of those decisions were right. Some of them left me more exposed than I should have been. Victor studied him for a long moment. You know, he said, there are very few people in my experience who can say something like that and actually mean it. It's easier, Nathan said, when you've already decided what actually matters. Victor nodded slowly. Then there's something else. He picked up a folder from the table, an actual physical folder, the old-fashioned kind, the kind Victor had always preferred, and opened it and slid it across to Nathan. Before we go into the board meeting, before we discuss formal roles or titles or any of that, there's something you need to see. Nathan looked at the folder. Inside was a printed document, a financial analysis, dense with figures, structured in columns that Nathan recognized immediately as the specific format used by Apex Meridian's internal audit team. He started reading. It took him approximately 90 seconds to understand what he was looking at. Then he read it again more slowly, making sure he hadn't misread. He looked up at Victor. This isn't Caldwell's operation, he said. No, Victor said. It's not. This is a different account structure. Different routing. Different, Nathan stopped. How long has this been running? Based on the trace, approximately 31 months. That predates Caldwell's operation by over a year. Yes. Nathan set the folder down carefully. Victor. Are you telling me there are two? I'm telling you, Victor said, very quietly, that Ethan Caldwell may not have been working alone. And I'm telling you that the person who may have been coordinating with him has been significantly more careful than he was. He paused. And I'm telling you that this is why Catherine Voss is bringing in a federal forensic accounting team and why the board meeting, day after tomorrow, is going to be considerably more complicated than anyone currently understands. Nathan stared at the folder. How much? He said. The trace isn't complete, Victor said. But the preliminary figure is somewhere between $40 and $60 million over 31 months. The number sat between them. Who else has seen this? Nathan said. You, me, Catherine, and two members of her team who are under NDA, Victor said. No one inside this company. Not yet. Because you don't know yet who inside this company you can trust. Because, Victor said, until yesterday, the person inside this company I trusted most with something like this was working on the third floor as a systems technician. Nathan was quiet for a long time. Outside the conference room windows, the city was fully awake, moving through its morning with the brisk, purposeful energy of a November Wednesday, people in coats, buses running. The ordinary machinery of ordinary life moving forward, the way it always did. Different to fact that inside this building, the shape of something had just gotten considerably larger and considerably darker than anyone had anticipated 24 hours ago. I need access, Nathan said. Full access. Not the legacy credentials proper. Documented, authorized access to the complete system architecture. Every layer. Done, Victor said. Effective this morning. And I need a room. Not the server room on 3. Something with a dedicated line and enough processing capacity to run a complete network behavioral analysis over a 36-month window. Also done. And I need one more thing, Nathan said. Name it. I need you to tell me honestly, Nathan said, whether Claire Whitmore is part of this. The question landed in the room like something heavy. Victor looked at him. Why, he said. Because she's the CEO, Nathan said. Because a financial diversion at this scale, running for 31 months, through this many layers of the company's structure, someone at or near the top of this organization either knew about it or was positioned so that it was allowed to exist without triggering review. I'm not accusing her. I'm asking you to tell me honestly what you know. Victor was quiet for a moment. What I know, he said carefully, is that Claire Whitmore was recruited specifically to fix this company's financial oversight gaps. That she arrived 18 months ago after the secondary operation was already running. that she has made structural changes to the audit process that have actually made it harder, not easier, for something like this to hide. He paused. And that the Caldwell operation, the staged credential event, the false trail, targeted her blind spots specifically. Her tendency toward fast, decisive action. Her bias toward evidence that fits a clear narrative. Her trust in Caldwell, whom she had worked with before she came to Apex Meridian. Nathan absorbed that. Someone knew her well enough to engineer a play specifically for her psychology, Nathan said. Yes, that means someone with access to her history, her professional background, her decision-making patterns. Nathan paused. Someone who had been watching her for a long time. That's what the federal team is going to be looking for, Victor said. Starting today, Nathan stood up. Give me the access, he said. And the room. I'll start the behavioral analysis today. He was almost to the conference room door when it opened from the other side. Claire Whitmore stood in the doorway. She looked at Nathan. He looked at her. Behind her, the executive corridor was empty. She had come here herself, without an assistant, without a buffer. I heard voices, she said. It was almost an apology for interrupting. Almost. Come in, Victor said. She stepped into the room and looked at the folder on the table. She couldn't see the contents from where she stood, but something in the way Nathan and Victor were positioned, the particular careful stillness of two people who have just been discussing something significant, told her the shape of what she'd walked into. There's more, she said. Not a question. Yes, Victor said. Her jaw tightened by a fraction. How much more? Victor told her the preliminary figures. Nathan watched her face as she received it, the same process as the night before. The slow, cold current working through her, but this time there was something else in her expression. Not just the shock of scale, but something that looked like personal fury. The specific fury of someone who has been used as a mechanism in something they didn't know they were part of. 40 to 60 million, she said flatly. Preliminary, Victor said. Over 31 months, beginning before your tenure. But running through it, she looked at Nathan. And Caldwell wasn't the only one. That's what the analysis will determine, Nathan said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with a directness that Nathan had to credit her for, Do you think it's possible it leads to someone on my level? Nathan looked at her. I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I'd be lying if I said I'd ruled it out. She received that without flinching. Good, she said. That's the right answer. She looked at Victor. I want to be in every briefing. I want to see every piece of analysis as it develops. I'm not going to sit in my office while this gets investigated around me. That was my intention, Victor said. And I want to be in the room when we talk to the board. She paused. Not just for my own position, because they need to hear from me directly. They need to know that this company's leadership understands the full extent of what happened and is not going to manage the narrative rather than manage the problem. Victor looked at her for a moment. You've thought about this since last night, he said. I didn't sleep very much, she said. Nathan almost said something. He didn't, but something in his expression apparently shifted enough that Claire caught it because she looked at him and said, What? Nothing, Nathan said. Tell me. He considered for a moment. My wife used to say that the night you can't sleep is usually the night your brain is doing the most important work, he said. That the things you figure out between midnight and 4 a.m. are the things you actually believe, because you don't have the energy left to perform them. Claire Whitmore looked at him for a long moment. She sounds like she was smart, she said quietly. She was the smartest person I've ever known, Nathan said. And I've known some very smart people. The three of them stood in that conference room for a moment, the chairman, the CEO, and the man who had been invisible for 3 years with a folder full of numbers on the table and an investigation running through the walls around them. And something shifted in the room in that moment, not dramatically, not with any announcement. Just the quiet shift of people who have been on different sides of something large beginning to orient in the same direction. It was Victor who broke it. All right, he said. Nathan needs access and a workspace. Claire, legal needs you for the federal team intake at 9. I have the auditors at 9:30. He picked up his phone. We have approximately 48 hours before this goes wider than this building and the lawyers in it, and I want us as far ahead of it as we can possibly get. Claire nodded. She turned toward the door, then stopped. She turned back. Mr. Brooks, she said. He looked at her. Thank you, she said. For not, she paused, choosing the word carefully, for not using what happened yesterday in a way that would have made all of this harder. Nathan looked at her steadily. I wasn't protecting the company, he said. I was protecting what I built. There's a difference. She held his gaze. I understand the difference now, she said. And she walked out. By 9:15 a.m., Nathan was in a dedicated workspace on the 12th floor, a room that had been set up with the speed and thoroughness of people, with both resources and urgency, with full administrative access to every layer of the Apex Meridian system architecture. Not legacy credentials, not undocumented overrides. Proper, authorized, documented access. His name on the access log as someone with a reason to be there. It felt strange after 3 years to be seen. Not bad. Just strange. Like putting on a coat that you'd forgotten was yours and finding that it still fit. He started the behavioral analysis at 9:17. The program he built custom, from the ground up, in the same language he'd used to write the original Core Shield architecture, began crawling through 36 months of network traffic logs, financial transaction records, communication metadata, and system access events. It would take hours, possibly most of the day, but he had structured it to surface anomalies in waves, prioritized by probability weight, so the most significant signals would come up first. At 10:41, the first wave surfaced. Nathan leaned forward. The pattern was elegant. That was the first thing he noticed, and he noticed it with the particular cold admiration that anyone with genuine expertise feels when they encounter genuine expertise on the other side of a problem, even when that problem is a crime. Whoever had structured the secondary operation had done it beautifully. Each transaction was individually small enough to be unremarkable. The routing moved through subsidiaries in a sequence that mimicked legitimate intercompany transfers so closely that you would need to know the specific behavioral signature of legitimate transfers to distinguish them. The timing was calibrated, not random, but not rhythmic either, varying in a way that would defeat most pattern detection algorithms. Most pattern detection algorithms. Not Nathan's, because Nathan had written the original pattern detection algorithm for this system. He knew its blind spots the way a locksmith knows where the tumblers fall, and he had built his analysis tool to see past those blind spots specifically. He ran the flagged transactions through a secondary filter. At 11:07, he had a name. He stared at it on his screen. He sat very still for a long moment. Then he picked up the phone and called Victor. I have something, he said. Already? The behavioral analysis surfaced a primary signature in the second wave. Nathan paused. Victor, the secondary operation doesn't go to Caldwell as a collaborator. It runs parallel to him, through a completely separate structure. It's been running since before he started, and the access point. He stopped. The access point traces to a board member. Silence on the line. Which one? Victor said. Very quietly, Nathan told him. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Nathan checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Victor, I'm here, Victor said. I'm processing. Another pause. Are you certain? I need another 3 hours to build the full evidential chain, Nathan said. But the signature is clean and the routing is unambiguous. I'm certain enough that you need to know right now, and certain enough that Catherine Voss needs to be sitting next to you when I call you back. All right, Victor said. And then Nathan. Yeah. I want you to know something, Victor said. Whatever comes out of the next 48 hours. Whatever form your role in this company takes going forward. What you have done, what you have been doing quietly, for 3 years, And what you are doing right now matters. It matters to this company, and it matters to the people in it, and it matters that you did it the way you did." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I'll call you back in 3 hours," he said. "I'll be here." Nathan hung up and turned back to his screen. Outside, the city moved forward. Across town, in an elementary school on the east side of Columbus, a girl named Lily was learning about state capitals, and doing so, her teacher would later tell her father, with an enthusiasm that was slightly excessive but entirely charming. She had no idea that Wednesday morning what was happening inside a glass tower downtown. She had no idea that the quiet man who packed her lunch with the diagonal cut and tucked notes under the apple slices had spent the morning taking apart something large and complicated and dangerous with the focused, methodical skill of someone who had been waiting, without drama, without announcement, for the right moment to be fully, undeniably seen. Nathan worked through the morning, and at 2:17 p.m. he called Victor back. "I have everything," he said. "All of it. The full chain." Victor's voice was very steady. "Send it to Catherine." "Already done," Nathan said. "And Nathan, yes, brace yourself," Victor said. "Because when this goes to the board tomorrow, it's not going to be a meeting. It's going to be the beginning of something much larger." Nathan looked at the screen, at the name, at the 31 months of careful, patient, elegant theft that had been running through this company like a current nobody had known to feel for. "I know," he said, and he was already ready. The call came at 6:42 the following morning. Nathan was already awake. He'd been up since 5:14, the alarm, the coffee, the 16 minutes, but this morning the routine felt different. Not heavier, exactly, more charged. The way the air feels before a storm when the pressure has been building for so long that the atmosphere itself seems to be holding its breath. Lily had sensed it at breakfast. She was 8, not oblivious. She had her mother's eyes, and Nathan had come to understand her mother's particular gift for reading a room through peripheral vision, the ability to know what was happening in a space, without appearing to look directly at it. "Dad," she said, pushing her cereal around, "are you okay?" "I'm good, Bug. You're doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where your face is normal but your hands are doing this." She demonstrated both hands flat on the table, completely still, the particular controlled stillness that Nathan controlled realized he defaulted to under pressure until his 8-year-old showed it back to him. He looked at his hands. He laughed. A real one, the kind that comes up unexpectedly and can't be managed. "I'm okay," he said. "Dad has a big day today, but I'm okay." She studied him for a moment, with those serious eyes. "Is it the kind of big day where things get better, or the kind where things get more complicated first?" Nathan looked at his daughter. "Both," he said honestly. "Probably both." She nodded, apparently satisfied with the honesty, and went back to her cereal. "Okay, don't forget the diagonal." He had not forgotten the diagonal. He dropped her at 7:15, watched her disappear through the school doors, with her purple backpack bouncing, and then sat in the parked car for exactly 45 seconds, with his hands on the steering wheel before his phone rang. "Victor, they know," Victor said without preamble. Nathan's hand tightened on the phone. "Which part?" "The board member. Richard Cho. He knows we found him." Someone told him. Last night, after Catherine's team ran the secondary access verification. One of her staff made a call they shouldn't have made. Victor's voice was controlled, but Nathan could hear the edge underneath it. "Cho hasn't fled. He's still in the city." But his personal attorney contacted Catherine at 5:30 this morning with a statement. "What kind of statement?" "The kind," Victor said, "where someone who knows the walls are closing decides to define the narrative before someone else does." Nathan pulled out of the school parking lot. "What's in it?" "He's claiming whistleblower status." The word landed like a stone in a still pond. Nathan processed that. "He's claiming he discovered the Caldwell operation independently," Victor continued, "and was building an internal case before the external investigation began." He's saying the fund movements that trace to him were part of a private effort to document and recover diverted assets. That's... Nathan stopped. Victor, the behavioral signature of his operation, predates Caldwell's by over a year. If he was responding to Caldwell, he'd have to have discovered a theft before the theft started. Yes, Victor said. Catherine made exactly that point at 5:45 this morning. So Cho's attorney knows the timeline is wrong. Cho's attorney is not paid to be right, Victor said. He's paid to create delay, doubt, and the possibility of an alternative reading. Even a story that doesn't fully hold together buys time. And in this case, time is the one thing we cannot afford to give. Nathan turned onto the highway. What does Catherine want? She wants you in the room this morning, Victor said. Not just the board meeting. A pre-meeting, 7:45, her team and you and me and Claire. She wants to go through the complete evidential chain before Cho's people try to introduce his version into the formal proceedings. I'll be there at 7:30, Nathan said. Nathan. Victor paused. This is going to be an ugly morning. I know. Richard Cho has been on this board for 11 years. He has relationships. He has allies who don't yet know what he's done, and some of them are going to react to his statement before they react to the evidence. The room is going to be difficult. Victor, Nathan said quietly, I sat in a room yesterday and was told to take my badge and leave for something I didn't do. I think I can handle a difficult room. A pause. Then with something that was almost warmth, fair point. 7:30, Nathan said. I'll bring coffee. He actually did bring coffee. A carrier, with 6 cups from the place on 5th that he'd been going to for 3 years, the one where the morning guy knew his order and never tried to make conversation, which was exactly the kind of establishment Nathan had always preferred. He set it on the conference room table at 7:28. And Catherine Voss looked at it and then at him with an expression that suggested she hadn't expected that and that it had recalibrated her estimate of him upward by a small but meaningful amount. Thank you, she said. You've been up since before 5, Nathan said. Everyone has. She took a cup. You too, I'm always up before 5, he said. I have an 8-year-old with opinions about sandwich geometry. Catherine almost smiled. Almost. She was too focused for a full smile, but the almost was genuine. The pre-meeting was 40 minutes of dense, fast, methodical work. Catherine walked the group through Richard Cho's attorney's statement point by point, and Nathan walked them through the behavioral analysis data, point by point. And in the intersection of those two presentations, the full shape of what they were dealing with became visible with a clarity that had the particular cold quality of something that cannot be argued with. The timeline was incontrovertible. Nathan had been thorough enough building the evidential chain with the same precision he brought to security architecture, which was the precision of someone who understands that a structure is only as strong as its weakest documented joint, that there was no gap in it that Cho's attorney could usefully exploit. The fund movements preceded Caldwell's operation. The access patterns were Cho's alone. The behavioral signature matched his communication metadata, his calendar records, his physical access to the building. Claire had been quiet through most of the pre-meeting, taking notes on a legal pad in a handwriting that was angular and fast and very small. At one point, she looked up and said, "The 4th subsidiary account, the one routed through Cayman, whose name is on the corporate documentation." Everyone looked at her. "It'll be a nominee," Catherine said. "We haven't fully pierced that yet. I want it pierced before we walk into that board meeting," Claire said. Because if Cho's defense relies on the argument that the accounts weren't directly tied to him, I want to be able to put a document on the table that shows the connection. I want no space. Catherine looked at her for a moment. "We might not have time." "How long does it take?" Claire said. She looked at Nathan. Nathan had already been thinking about it. The Cayman registration is in a jurisdiction that has a disclosure agreement with U.S. federal investigators dating from 2021, he said. If Catherine's team makes the right call this morning, they could have the documentation by 11, maybe 10:30. Make the call, Claire said to Catherine. Catherine made the call. 8:47 a.m. The boardroom on the 15th floor was a different kind of room from anything else in the building. It had the quality of a space designed to communicate permanence. Everything in it said that decisions made here had weight, had consequence, would outlast the people making them. 12 chairs around a long table, a screen at the far end. Windows on two sides. Nathan had never been in it before. He stood near the door for a moment and took in the room the way he always took in spaces, noting the exits, the sightlines, the way the chairs were arranged, and what that arrangement said about how the room expected power to flow. 11 of the 12 board members were already present when they arrived. Victor, as chairman, sat at the head of the table. Claire took a seat to his right. Nathan, at Catherine's instruction, sat against the wall with the legal team, not at the table, not yet, but visible. Present. A fact in the room that everyone would have to account for. Richard Cho was at the table. Nathan had seen him before. Board members occasionally moved through the building, and Nathan had been in enough spaces over 3 years to have a catalog of faces and names that most systems technicians wouldn't have. Cho was 61, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore expensive watches without drawing attention to them. He sat at his usual seat, third from Victor's left, with the composed, slightly distanced expression of someone who has decided to behave as though the allegations are not about him specifically, but about a misunderstanding that will resolve itself. His attorney sat behind him, slightly to the left. A man Nathan didn't recognize, which meant he wasn't from Catherine's world, which meant he was fast and expensive, but probably not as technically thorough as the situation required. Victor opened the meeting at 8:51. He did not ease into it. "I'm going to dispense with the standard agenda," Victor said. "The purpose of this meeting is to present findings from an investigation that began 48 hours ago and has moved faster than any of us anticipated. Catherine Voss and her team will present. Following that presentation, the board will hear a response. Following that, we will make decisions." He paused. "The situation is serious. I'm asking everyone in this room to receive what you're about to hear with the understanding that it is fully documented and that the documentation has already transmitted to federal investigators." Someone shifted in a chair. Someone else put their phone face down on the table, which was the specific gesture of a person who has just decided to give something their complete attention. Richard Cho's expression did not change. Catherine went first. She had the particular quality of a skilled litigator who understands that the most devastating presentations are also the clearest ones. No drama, no rhetorical embellishment. Just evidence laid in sequence so that each piece illuminates the next and the whole picture assembles itself in the listener's mind as if it were obvious. She had been doing this for 20 years. She was very good at it. She walked through the Caldwell operation in 8 minutes. Clean, complete, conclusive. She walked through the connection between Caldwell and Cho, the communication record, the timing correlations, the evidence that the staged credential event targeting Nathan had discussed between them and encrypted messages that federal investigators had cracked the previous afternoon. That was new. Nathan had not known about the messages. He held himself very still. "The encrypted communication record," Catherine said, "shows 11 exchanges between Caldwell and an account that Federal Forensic Analysis has linked to Richard Cho over a period of 6 weeks leading up to the credential event. The final message, sent the day before the stage transfer, reads," she glanced at the document in her hand, "executed Thursday. Make sure it holds for 72 hours. That's all we need." The boardroom was absolutely silent. Cho's attorney leaned forward and began to say something. Cho put one hand on the table, and the attorney stopped. "And then," Catherine continued, "there is the matter of the secondary financial operation." She nodded toward Nathan, and Nathan moved to the secondary screen that had been set up on the right side of the room and pulled up the behavioral analysis display. He had condensed it, 3 years of working with non-technical audiences, explaining system anomalies to operations managers who didn't know a network packet from a postage stamp had given him the skill of distillation, of taking complex architecture and rendering it visible to someone who had never had reason to think about it before. He walked them through it in 11 minutes. The timeline, the account structure, the routing pattern, the behavioral signature, and how it matched. The evidence chain that connected the money to the man. He kept his voice completely level, not cold level. There is a difference. Cold is performance. Level is control. Nathan had learned the difference a long time ago, from someone who told him that the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of people who want to rattle you is to be the calmest person there. He was the calmest person there. When he finished, one of the board members, a woman named Patricia Lund, who Nathan knew had been with the company since before Claire's tenure, said, without preamble, "Richard, I want to hear you say something." Cho looked at her. "I want to hear you tell me," Patricia said, looking at me, "that what we just saw is wrong." A pause. "My attorney has advised me," Cho said, "not to respond to the presentation before we've had the opportunity to review the underlying documentations." "Richard." Patricia's voice was very quiet. "Look at me and tell me it's wrong." Another pause. Cho looked at Patricia Lund, and he said nothing. It was not the silence of a man formulating a denial. It was not the silence of a man choosing his words carefully. It was the silence of a man who has looked across a titsable at someone who has known him for 11 years and found that he cannot perform the lie at the required distance. Patricia looked away from him. She looked at Victor. "Let's proceed," she said. At 9:44, Cho's attorney requested a recess. Victor granted 15 minutes. In the corridor outside the boardroom, Nathan stood with a coffee cup and watched through the glass wall as Cho and his attorney had a conversation that was brief and visibly uncomfortable, characterized by the specific body language of someone receiving information they had paid a great deal of money to not have to receive. Claire appeared beside Nathan. She stood there for a moment without saying anything, looking through the same glass. "Patricia Lund has been on the board for 9 years, she said. She recruited Cho originally." "I know," Nathan said. "She's going to carry the vote." Claire paused. "Whatever we ask for, Patricia will carry it. The others will follow her. What are we asking for?" Claire looked at him. "Full cooperation with federal investigators. Immediate suspension of Cho, pending criminal referral. And a complete internal audit of every board-level access and authorization over the past 3 years." She paused. "That last one is going to be unpopular." It's necessary," Nathan said. "I know it is." She was quiet for a moment. "Nathan, when you identified Cho yesterday, when you saw the name, what was your first reaction?" Nathan considered the question honestly. "Relief," he said. She looked at him. "Relief? That it wasn't you," he said simply. "A beat." Claire looked at him steadily. "You actually considered it." "I told you I did," he said. "That morning in the conference room. I said I'd ruled out nothing. Most people in your position," she said slowly, "would have come in here wanting to protect themselves, wanting to establish their own standing before anything else. You came in and ran an analysis that could have pointed anywhere, including at the person who fired you. The analysis points where the evidence points," Nathan said. "That's the whole point of building it right." Claire was quiet for a long moment. "The easiest people to ignore," she said, almost to herself. Nathan recognized his own words. "Are often the ones holding everything together," he finished quietly. She looked at him. "I want you to know something," she said. "What I'm about to say isn't about the company. It isn't about your role going forward or the legal proceedings or any of that. It's something I need to say as a person." Nathan waited. "I have made a lot of hard decisions in my career," Claire said. "I've restructured departments and let people go and made calls that kept companies alive, but cost people their jobs, and I have sat with all of that, and I have believed, every time, that I was seeing clearly enough to make the call responsibly." She paused. "Tuesday afternoon was the first time in a very long time that I made a decision and was completely fundamentally wrong in a way that wasn't about the numbers or the strategy or the execution. I was wrong about a person. I looked at you and I saw a category, not a human being. And a man who had done nothing wrong walked out of my building, carrying a photograph of his daughter. Her voice had not changed, still measured, still controlled. But there was something underneath the control now, something that had been working its way to the surface since the moment she'd walked into that lobby and seen 7 black SUVs and a chairman shaking hands with the man she'd fired, and Nathan could hear it. "You don't need to say all of this," he said, not unkindly. "Just honestly." "Yes, I do," she said. "I know I don't need to say it for you. You're not asking for this, I understand that. I need to say it because the kind of mistake I made doesn't stay contained to the moment it happens. It moves forward. It shapes how you treat the next person, and the one after that. And the only way to stop that," she paused, "is to say it clearly, out loud, to the person you said it to." Nathan held his coffee cup. "My wife," he said after a moment, had a saying. She said, "The measure of a person isn't what they do when they're right. It's what they do with being wrong." Claire absorbed that. "She sounds," she said, "like she would have been formidable. She would have had your entire board sorted out in 40 minutes, Nathan said. And they would have felt grateful about it." Claire laughed. A real one, brief, surprised out of her. It changed her face completely, for just that second made her look younger, lighter, like someone who remembered how to breathe. The recess ended at 10:02. They went back into the boardroom. What happened next took 2 hours and 40 minutes and was, in the experience of everyone present, one of the most consequential 2 hours and 40 minutes in Apex Meridian's history. Cho's attorney made his case. Catherine systematically dismantled it, using the evidential chain Nathan had built with the methodical thoroughness of someone laying precision charges placed exactly, designed to bring down only what needed to come down and leave the rest of the structure standing. At 10:47, the Cayman documentation arrived. Catherine received it on her phone, printed it on the portable printer her assistant had brought, and placed it on the table in front of Richard Cho without comment. Cho looked at it. His attorney looked at it. His attorney said something quietly to Cho that Nathan couldn't hear from where he sat. Cho straightened in his chair. "I'd like to make a statement," Cho said. Victor looked at him. "Go ahead." What followed was not a confession, exactly. It was the statement of a man who had looked at the completely assembled picture of his own actions and made a calculation, the specific calculation of someone trained in institutional power, who understands that the manner of your cooperation shapes the terms of what comes after. He said enough. He acknowledged the fund movements and declined to characterize them, which, in legal terms, was as close to an admission as you could get, while still leaving room for the attorneys to argue about definition. But Patricia Lunn looked at Victor the moment Cho finished and said, simply, "Call the vote." The vote took 4 minutes. Unanimous. Every board member present. Richard Cho left the room at 12:31 p.m. with his attorney, and without looking at anyone as he went, which was itself a kind of statement, the statement of someone who has decided that the dignity of the exit is the last thing they can control. The boardroom settled. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Patricia Lund, 63 years old, silver hair, the particular steadiness of someone who has sat in difficult rooms for a very long time, looked down the table at Nathan. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "I owe you something." Nathan looked at her. "I've been on this board for 9 years, she said. "This is a company that you built the foundation of. And in 9 years I didn't know your name until 48 hours ago." She paused. "That's a failure of mine, of this board's, and I want to say that plainly." Nathan nodded. "Thank you," he said, "just that. No performance, no magnanimity theater. Just a genuine acknowledgement received and returned." Victor called a brief recess. People moved, spoke quietly, made calls. The energy in the room had the particular quality of aftermath, the specific texture of a space where something significant has just concluded, and the next thing hasn't quite begun yet. Nathan stepped out into the corridor. He needed 60 seconds of quiet and a moment to look at the city through a window and confirm, in his own internal accounting, that everything was still real and solid and proceeding. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Okafor's number. But it wasn't Mrs. Okafor's phrasing, it said. "Dad, how is your big day going?" "Mrs. O is letting me text. I believe in you. Lee Jate." Nathan stood in the corridor of the 15th floor of Apex Meridian Corporation, surrounded by lawyers and board members and the wreckage of a scheme that had taken him 4 days and the better part of his complete professional skill set to dismantle, and he looked at that text from his 8-year-old daughter. He typed back, "Getting better. Love you, Bug. Diagonal tomorrow." 3 seconds. "Obviously diagonal," she replied. He was smiling when Victor appeared beside him. "Ready?" Victor said. "Almost," Nathan said. "One thing first." Victor waited. "The role you're going to offer me," Nathan said. "Whatever the title is, whatever the structure, I want 2 conditions." "Name them." "I keep my own hours," Nathan said. "Within reason. There are mornings that belong to Lily before they belong to anything else." Victor nodded. "Done. What's the second?" "The internal training program," Nathan said. "The one I want to build. For the operations and systems staff. The people on the 3rd floor, the 5th floor, the maintenance teams, the technicians. The people who are in this building every day and who understand things about how it actually functions that no one on the 14th floor has ever bothered to ask about." He paused. "I want to build a formal channel for that knowledge to move upward. Not as a favor, as policy." Victor looked at him for a long moment. "Because," Victor said slowly, "if this company had had that channel 3 years ago, someone would have asked me a real question," Nathan said, "and I would have answered it, and we would have found Caldwell's gaps 18 months before he used them." Victor was quiet. "Done," he said, "both conditions. I'll have Catherine draft it into the formal agreement." Nathan put his phone in his pocket. They went back into the boardroom. And this time, when Nathan sat down, he sat at the table. The formal offer came on a Friday, not through HR, not through an automated system or a templated email with a PDF attachment. Victor Hale delivered it in person, the way he did everything that mattered to him, directly, without ceremony, sitting across from Nathan in the same conference room on the 14th floor where, 72 hours earlier, the entire architecture of deception had begun to fall apart. The document was simple, 2 pages, clean language, no ambiguity. The title at the top read, Chief Security and Innovation Advisor, Apex Meridian Corporation. Nathan read it twice, both pages, every line. Then he looked up. "The 2 conditions," he said. "Both in the agreement," Victor said. Section 3, Paragraph 2, his own hours within operational reason. Section 4, Paragraph 1, the Internal Knowledge Transfer Program, funded, staffed, and established as formal policy within 90 days. Nathan looked back at the document. He thought about Tuesday morning. The coffee at 5:14, the diagonal cut, the porch light misses. Okafor had left on. He thought about standing in his kitchen at midnight, looking at crayon drawings on the refrigerator, and doing the arithmetic of what he had built and what he had chosen, and whether those 2 things were reconcilable. He thought about the badge on the glass desk. He picked up the pen. He signed it. Victor watched him do it and said nothing for a moment. "Then there's one more thing." Nathan set the pen down. "The board wants to acknowledge you publicly," Victor said. "Not a press release. Not a company email. A formal statement at the all-hands next week, in front of the full staff. They want the company to understand what happened, and who was responsible for catching it." "I don't need a ceremony," Nathan said. "I know you don't," Victor said. "But there are 430 people in this company who spent 3 years working alongside you without knowing who you were. Some of them ignored you. Some of them talked over you. Some of them handed you work orders without looking at your face." He paused. "They need to understand something about themselves, Nathan. Not about you. About themselves. about what they missed and why they missed it and what that costs a company and what it costs a person. He paused again. You can decline. I'll respect it completely. But I'm asking you to consider. Nathan was quiet for a long time. He thought about Marcus Webb, who had received his report and filed it away in 40 seconds. He thought about Priya in the compliance office, working her flowchart. He thought about the colleagues who passed him in hallways for 3 years and learned his name the way you the name of a piece of furniture without investment. He thought about the 3 other people he knew from the old world who had made similar choices, who had stepped back from prominence for their own reasons, personal or professional, and who had found that the stepping back, once complete, had a way of becoming permanent, not because they chose it, but because the institutions around them stopped offering them a way back in. He thought about what it would mean not for him, but for the next person. The next Nathan Brooks, the next quiet expert in the gray shirt on the 3rd floor, sitting on knowledge that nobody was asking for, watching the gaps grow wider, because the channels for their voice ran upward only in one direction. All right, he said. The all hands. Victor nodded. There's one condition, Nathan said. Of course there is. I speak last, Nathan said. After you, after Claire, after whoever else needs to say what they need to say. I go last, and I get to say what I actually want to say, not a version of it. Agreed, Victor said without hesitation. Nathan stood up. I need to go pick up my daughter, he said. She has a thing about not being the last one in carpool. Victor smiled at that. A real one, the kind that reached his eyes. Go, he said. And Nathan, welcome back. Nathan paused at the door. I never left, he said. I just wasn't visible. He walked out. The week that followed moved differently than any week Nathan had experienced in 3 years. Not faster, exactly more densely, more populated. Where before he had moved through the building in the comfortable anonymity of someone who existed in the infrastructure rather than in the human landscape of the place, now he existed in both simultaneously, and the adjustment required a recalibration he hadn't fully anticipated. People looked at him now. Not rudely, not with the awkward intensity of spectacle, but with the specific attention of people who are revising a story they had already filed away and told themselves. He would walk through a corridor and catch it in the peripheral reactions, the slight double take, the half-second pause, the recalibration behind someone's eyes as the man they thought they knew resolved into something more complicated and more real. Some of them said things. Marcus Webb found him on Monday morning and stood in the hallway outside the server rooms and said, with the uncomfortable directness of someone who has been working up to something, I should have taken your report seriously. I've been sitting with that since Tuesday. I want you to know I know that. Nathan looked at him. Did you look at the full log stack? The way I told you to? Marcus blinked. What? Tuesday afternoon, when I was leaving. I told you to check the system logs. Full stack, not just the flagged events. Did you do it? Marcus looked slightly stricken. No, I didn't. I thought you were... I didn't know what to make of it. It would have shown you the access pattern, irregularity, within about 40 minutes, Nathan said. Not to wound him, to give him something useful. The timestamp correlation was visible, without any special tools. Just the standard log viewer. Marcus absorbed that. I'll know that for next time. Yeah, Nathan said. That's the point. He walked past Marcus and into the server room and went to work. Behind him, he heard Marcus stand there for another moment before moving on. He didn't look back. The other interaction that stayed with him happened on Wednesday, 3 days before the all-hands. He was in the elevator when it stopped on the 6th floor, and Priya, the compliance officer, fresh master's degree, slightly surprised to be in an actual office, stepped in. She recognized him immediately, and the recognition produced the specific expression of someone who has been rehearsing a conversation and has just been ambushed by its starting conditions. Mr. Brooks, she said. Priya. She stood there for a moment as the elevator moved. Then, with the directness of someone who has decided that the rehearsed version is inadequate, and she might as well just say it, I keep thinking about what you said. When you came to my office. Which part? That you helped write the protocol. She paused. I looked it up. After everything came out, there's a document in the Historical Compliance Archive from 2014. A protocol framework document. She hesitated. Your name is on it. Nathan said nothing. I cited that document to tell you the protocol routed back through IT security, she said. I cited your own document to explain why I couldn't help you. The elevator reached Nathan's floor. He stepped out. Then held the door for a moment. The protocol was right, he said. The routing was right as a structure. The problem was that the structure had been compromised at the point it was routing through. He looked at her. The lesson isn't to distrust the protocol. The lesson is to understand why a protocol exists, not just how it works. If you understand the why, you can see when the how has stopped serving it. Priya looked at him. That's a different way of thinking about compliance work, she said. It's the right way, he said. He let the elevator doors close. He was still thinking about that conversation on Thursday evening, when his phone rang, and the screen showed a number he hadn't expected. He looked at it for a moment, then answered, Ms. Whitmore. I hope I'm not interrupting something. He was sitting at the kitchen table, helping Lily with a worksheet about fractions, which Lily had very strong feelings about. Just fractions, he said. Give me 1 second. He covered the phone. Bug. 5 minutes. Can you work on number 4? Lily sighed with the theatrical weight of someone being asked to single-handedly move a mountain. But she picked up her pencil. Nathan stepped into the hallway. Sorry, he said. What's on your mind? Tomorrow, Claire said. The all hands. I'm trying to figure out what to say. He paused. You're asking me? I'm asking you, she said. Yes. I know that's probably not the conventional move, but I spent most of this week thinking about the difference between saying the right thing and saying a true thing, and I decided I'd rather ask directly than deliver something polished that doesn't actually land. Nathan leaned against the hallway wall. What do you want to say? He asked. I want to say that I made a serious error, she said. Not in general terms. Specifically, what I did, why it was wrong, and what it means for how this company is going to operate going forward. I want to say it to 430 people in a way that doesn't feel like crisis management. Then don't manage it, Nathan said. Just say it. The same way you said it to me in the conference room the night everything came out. He paused. You didn't ask me if it was okay to apologize. You didn't soften it or frame it for your own protection. You just said I looked at you and saw a category, not a human being. And a man who had done nothing wrong walked out of my building carrying a photograph of his daughter. He paused again. Say that. Say it to 430 people. Exactly that. A long silence. She started. It's uncomfortable, he said. I know it is, but they'll remember it. And more importantly, they'll believe it. People can hear the difference between something that's designed to be heard and something that's true. Another silence. Longer, your wife, Claire said quietly. Did she tell you that? Nathan was quiet for a moment. She did, he said. She was right. She usually was. Okay, Claire said. Thank you. A pause. How's the fraction situation? Nathan looked toward the kitchen, where Lily could be heard muttering something argumentative about the fundamental concepts of halves. Contentious, he said. Claire laughed. That same laugh as in the corridor brief, surprised out of her. Real. Good luck, she said. Thanks, he said. Same to you tomorrow. He hung up and went back to fractions. The all-hands meeting on Friday morning had been moved from the standard venue, a mid-sized conference room, on the 8th floor to the main auditorium on the 2nd floor, which held the full company. It was the space used for the annual address, for significant announcements, for moments that the institution wanted everyone to receive together. The decision to use it now was itself a statement. Nathan arrived early and sat in the back row. He had done this intentionally. He did not go to the reserved seats at the front. He did not stand near the stage. He sat in the back row. in the corner, with a coffee cup and his black notebook, and he watched 430 people file into a room and find seats. And he listened to the particular sound of a large group of people settling into a space and wondering what they were about to be told. He heard his name several times, in the murmurs and the side conversations and the specific registers of people who have been processing information for a week and are still not quite sure what to do with all of it. He heard it said with curiosity and with something that might have been guilt, and with the particular inflection of people for whom a familiar face has suddenly become unfamiliar. He sat quietly and drank his coffee. Victor spoke first. He was concise, as he always was, when precision mattered more than comprehensiveness. He explained the investigation, the scope of what had been recovered, the status of the legal proceedings. He named Ethan Caldwell and Richard Cho without euphemism their names, their roles, their actions, stated plainly and without softening language. He said that the company would cooperate fully with federal investigators and that the board had already taken remediation steps that he enumerated clearly. Then he said, "What I want to speak to directly is something that the investigation revealed that goes beyond the criminal conduct. It reveals something about this company's culture, about what we see and what we fail to see, and about the cost of that failure. Want to give that conversation to someone who understands it better than I do." And he nodded to Claire. Claire Whitmore walked to the podium and for a moment just stood there. Not gathering herself, she was already gathered, just letting the room see that she was present, fully, without armor. "On Tuesday of last week," she said, "I fired a man." The room was absolutely still. "I fired him in 4 minutes," she said. "I looked at a log entry, at a title on a badge, at a man in a plain gray shirt who sat across my desk without raising his voice or making threats, and I made a decision about who he was based on what I could see on the surface. I decided he was the problem. I told him to take his badge and go." She paused. "And then I watched the rest of the week happen and understood what I had done and who I had done it to." She told them. Not the polished version. The true one. The way Nathan had told her to specific. Uncomfortable. Without the cushioning language that turns accountability into performance. She said, "I saw a category, not a human being," she said. "A man who had done nothing wrong walked out of this building, carrying his daughter's photograph." She said, "The badge I put on that desk was mine to take back, and it was also a symbol of something this company does that has to stop." Nathan sat in the back row and listened, and he watched the room as she spoke the specific way. 430 people receive a truth they recognize. Not with shock, with something quieter than shock. With the expression of people who have, in the week since Tuesday, been doing their own accounting and finding their own numbers uncomfortable. He saw Marcus Webb in the third row. Marcus was looking at his hands. He saw Priya, near the middle, very still, listening with the focused attention of someone storing something carefully. He saw Gerald, near the side wall, standing straight with his arms at his sides, and his face doing the specific thing it did when he was feeling something he wouldn't know how to put words to. Then Claire said, "The man I fired is in this room. He's been in this building for 3 years. Most of you have worked alongside him. Some of you have worked with him directly. Some of you have filed work orders with him and had things fixed before you understood they'd been broken. His name is Nathan Brooks, and what he knows about this company, about how it actually functions, about where its strengths and its vulnerabilities actually live, is knowledge that this company should have been actively seeking instead of letting sit invisible on the 3rd floor, because we weren't asking the right questions of the right people." She looked up from the podium and looked toward the back of the room. She looked directly at Nathan. The room turned. 430 people, in the way of crowds, moved their attention in the direction that authority had pointed it, and for a long moment, Nathan Brooks in the back row, in a navy blue shirt that was the same cut and quality as the gray one from Tuesday, with a coffee cup in his hand and a black notebook in his lap, was the most looked at in a room of 430 people. He did not look away. He did not shrink, but he also did not perform. He just sat there and let himself be seen. Then Victor gestured, and Nathan stood and walked to the front. He didn't use the podium. He stood beside it, at the front of the room, and looked out at the faces looking back at him. And he took one moment, just enough to locate himself in this, to feel the specific weight of standing visible in a place where he had been invisible. "I'm not going to talk about what I built," he said. "You'll read about that in the company communications, and the facts speak for themselves. I want to talk about something else." The room was completely quiet. "I chose to be invisible here," he said. "I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I didn't hide because someone forced me to. I made a choice, for my own reasons. That were good reasons. I had a daughter who needed a father, more than the tech industry needed another visible name. I have no regrets about that choice." He paused. "But I watched something happen over 3 years that I want to name, because I think it's the thing that actually matters today." He looked at the room. The people in this building who understand how this company actually functions, not how it looks on a slide deck, not how it's described in an earnings call, but how it actually functions, physically, systemically, day to day, are largely invisible to the people who make decisions about it. Not because they're hiding, not because they're not trying to be heard, but because the channels that carry information in this company run in one direction, upward, and what flows upward is shaped, filtered, and interpreted by the layers it passes through before it reaches anyone who can act on it. He paused. "That's not a conspiracy. It's not malice. It's just the way most institutions work. And it costs more than most institutions ever stop to calculate." He looked at Marcus for a moment, not pointedly, just steadily. "I filed 3 reports in the 5 hours before I was let go," he said. 3 different channels. Each one was reviewed and routed and acknowledged and not acted on. Not because the people who received them were bad people, because the system was structured to absorb reports without surfacing them, and nobody with the authority to change that had ever had a reason to notice. He looked at Priya. "I walked into the compliance office and was told that the protocol routed my report back through the channel that had been compromised," he said. "That wasn't Priya's fault. She was following the protocol correctly. The problem was that no one had built a mechanism for what happens when the protocol itself has been compromised." He looked at Gerald, near the side wall. "Gerald knew something was wrong," Nathan said. "When I handed in my badge," he said, and I'm quoting, "this doesn't seem right." He let that sit for a moment. Gerald was correct, and Gerald had no channel to put that instinct into. No formal mechanism for the person at the front desk to say, "Wait. Something here doesn't add up." He looked back out at the full room. "The program I'm going to build," he said, "is going to change that. It's not going to be a suggestion box or a culture initiative with a logo. It's going to be a structural change. Formal channels for institutional knowledge from the floor level, from the operations level, from every level of this company to move upward, received by people who are required to engage with it. Not file it. Engage with it." He paused. "Because the next time someone in this building sees something that doesn't add up, I want them to have somewhere to put that. And I want whoever receives it to understand that the person who sent it may be wearing a uniform and a badge that tells you nothing about what they actually know." He let that land. "The easiest people to ignore," he said quietly, "are often the ones holding everything together. This company almost fell apart this week because someone counted on that being true. It didn't fall apart because a few people, not many, but a few, were paying enough attention to the right things at the right time." He paused. "But we got lucky. I'd like us to be less dependent on luck going forward." He picked up his notebook. "That's all I wanted to say," he said. "Thank you for having me back." He stepped away from the front of the room. The applause started somewhere in the middle. Not organized, not led, not the kind of applause that crowds produce because the social script tells them to. The kind that starts because one person's hands move before they've thought about it, and then another person's. and then it builds, because everyone in the room is feeling the same thing, and the applause is just the sound that feeling makes when it needs somewhere to go. Walked back to the back row. He sat down. He drank the last of his coffee, which was cold. He thought, good, let it be done now. Let it be settled. It was not, of course, fully settled. The legal proceedings would run for months. Federal cases always did. The forensic accounting work would take longer than anyone wanted it to. The internal audit that the board had commissioned would surface things that would be uncomfortable before they were resolved. Building the knowledge transfer program, from the ground up, finding the right people, designing the right structure, making sure it was real policy and performance would be the work of the better part of a year. None of that was going to be simple or fast or clean. But something had shifted, something had moved from one place to another, and would not move back. And Nathan understood, in the particular way that people who have lived through genuine change understand it not with triumph, which is loud, but with something quieter and more lasting, that the shift was real. He left the auditorium at 10:43 and drove across town to an elementary school on the east side of Columbus. He was not supposed to be picking Lily up until 3:15. He knew that. Mrs. Okafor had already confirmed she would handle the afternoon the way she always did. There was no operational reason for Nathan to be parked outside Jefferson Elementary at 11 in the morning. He was there anyway. He sat in the parked car and waited and watched the school through the windshield. And at 11:07, the third grade class came out for their late morning recess. And he spotted Lily immediately, because he always spotted Lily immediately, the purple backpack. Even though she wasn't wearing it, the particular way she moved, the way she held her head at a slight angle when she was thinking hard about something, which was always. She was chasing someone, or being chased. He couldn't tell from this distance, and it honestly didn't matter. She was running with her whole self, the way 8-year-olds run, not efficiently, but fully, arms going, laughing at something, completely present in the moment of the chase. Nathan watched her. He sat there for 11 minutes and watched his daughter play, and he did not go in, and he did not call her over, and he did not interrupt any of it. He just watched. The way he had watched her sleep Tuesday night, standing in the dark of her room longer than strictly necessary. Then he started the car. He had work to do. The first meeting of the formal knowledge transfer program development team happened 3 weeks later. On a Tuesday morning, a detail that nobody had planned, but that Nathan noticed when he walked into the conference room and looked at the calendar. Exactly 3 weeks from the Tuesday he had stood in front of Claire Whitmore's glass desk with a badge between them. The team was 11 people, 3 from operations and systems, 2 from IT security, 1 from compliance, Priya, who had asked to be included and had made a case for her own inclusion that Nathan found thorough and convincing, 2 from the legal team, 1 from HR, Gerald from building security, because Nathan had personally requested Gerald and was prepared to argue about it if anyone objected, and Claire, who had said she wanted to attend, not as an executive observer, but as a working participant, which Nathan had told her was the only basis on which her attendance was useful. She had said, noted, and arrived 5 minutes early. They worked for 3 hours. It was good work. The kind of work that has friction in it, because the people doing it are bringing genuinely different perspectives into the same room and are honest enough to let the friction be productive rather than smooth it away. Priya had ideas about how the reporting structure should route that were more sophisticated than what Nathan had initially drafted. Gerald had observations about the kinds of things frontline staff witnessed and never reported that were specific and practical, and that nobody in a conference room would have thought of without him there. Claire asked questions. Real ones. The kind that come from listening rather than waiting to speak. At one point, she said, "Walk me through what happens when the report is received and the supervisor is the problem." And the conversation that followed from that question was the most useful 40 minutes of the 3 hours. And it came directly from her being genuinely present in the room. At the end of the 3 hours, Nathan looked around the table at 11 people who had just built the first real structural draft of something that didn't exist 3 weeks ago, and he felt something that he didn't have a word for, not pride. Exactly, which is too loud, and not satisfaction, which is too settled. Something more like the specific feeling of a man who chose to quiet life and found that the quiet life turned out to contain more than he had originally thought. He walked out of the conference room at 1:15 and called Mrs. Okafor. "I'm going to be on time today," he said. "Oh, that's a first, Mrs. Okafor said pleasantly. "Ha," Nathan said. "He was at the school at 3:14. "Exactly." Lily came out with her purple backpack and spotted him immediately, and her face did the thing it did, the complete and undefended brightness of a child who sees the person they love most in the world exactly where they were supposed to be, and she walked toward him with the unhurried confidence of someone who has always known without question that this particular person will be there when it counts. "Dad," she said, "you're on time. I said I would be." "You usually say that," she observed. He took her backpack. "How was fractions?" "We moved on," she said. "Now it's story problems." "Worse or better?" She considered this seriously. "Depends on the story," she said. They walked to the car. She talked about the story problems, and about the gecko situation with her friend Zoe, and about a disagreement at recess that she described with the forensic thoroughness of someone building an airtight case. Nathan listened. He asked the right questions. He put the backpack in the back seat and got in the driver's side and pulled into the carpool traffic. "Dad," Lily said from the back seat. "Yeah. Is your big day done now? The complicated one?" He looked at her in the rearview mirror. "The big part is done," he said. "Good," she said. And then, with the complete equanimity of an 8-year-old, who has obtained the information she needed and can now return to more pressing concerns. "Can we have grilled cheese tonight?" "Diagonal?" he said. She looked at him like the question barely deserved an answer. "Obviously," she said. Nathan drove them home through the Columbus afternoon, through the ordinary traffic of an ordinary Thursday, through the city, moving forward, the way cities always do, indifferent to the specific gravity of the small moments that happen inside it. The resignations and the reckonings and the quiet decisions that change the direction of a life. He made the grilled cheese. He cut it diagonal. He tucked the note under the apple slices the way he always did. Not a drawing tonight. Just 4 words, because 4 words were sometimes exactly the right amount. He wrote, "You already know. Love, Dad." She read it at the table and looked at him with those eyes that were her mother's eyes, and nodded once with great seriousness, as if the note confirmed something she had already suspected. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep and the house had gone quiet, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the small black notebook, and he wrote a few lines in it, not because he journaled, not because he was sentimental about documentation, but because there was something he needed to put somewhere outside his own head. He wrote, "The badge was never the measure. It was never supposed to be." He closed the notebook. He drank the rest of his coffee. And Nathan Brooks, the man who had built the walls of an empire and chosen to work inside them quietly, who had carried his daughter to bed and packed her lunch and left notes she would remember, long after she forgot the story problems, who had been invisible until the truth made being invisible impossible, who had never raised his voice, or made a threat, or asked anyone to see him before he was ready to be seen. The kitchen light fut and went to bed. The porch light stayed on, it always did, not as a signal to the world outside, not as a statement, or a symbol, or anything that required explanation. Just as the simple, steady, unambiguous fact of a man who had learned, the hard way and the right way, that the important things you do are almost never the things that anyone is watching. They are the things you do anyway, every single morning, whether anyone sees them or not.